Okay, I made it. Sorry I'm late, and therefore I don't have the news, the good stuff, all the things that I normally do, but I try to every day. Forgiveness, thank you. We had a great Monday night hangout for about 2 hours, so thanks everybody who came to that. You can watch it in the link if you're a subscriber. But I woke up with a terrible headache at 4:30 in the morning, which is usually when I wrap up the production of the show, do the news, etc. And then I came in, and my computer was having an issue that I couldn't figure out. And I said, this isn't going to be good for anybody to listen to. So you are welcome that I didn't do that to you. But I do have two great conversations with two awesome guests, favorites of ours. Dr. Jason Johnson joins me first, and Maura Quint joins me second. And both of these conversations, I think, are really good because of everything that's happening right now. We unpack a whole bunch of issues, and there's some provocative moments as well, including Dr. Jason Johnson making the case that Joe Biden was a terrible president, maybe one of the worst ever. Yep, you'll have to hear that, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you think about it. And Maura Quint has a great idea for coping and getting through these times to create a local group of people that you can work with and be together with and come up with ideas. It's great. Both interviews I learn a lot from both of them. I love talking with both of them. So let's do it right now. Starting with Dr. Jason Johnson, if you want to skip and jump to my conversation with Maura, that starts at about 33 minutes in. But of course, you know Jason Johnson from MSNBC, where he's a regular commentator and anchor. I met him years ago when we were both on panels at CNN together, but he is a PhD and a professor at the School of Global Journalism Communication, Morgan State University. He's hosted a podcast for a long time at Slate called A Word. You can listen to all those. He's starting a new project very soon. I'm always excited to talk to him. And here is our latest conversation. We talked on Friday, and it's crazy that a couple of things, there have been developments around, but so you know that. News moves fast in January 2025, of course. Let's do it right now with Dr. Jason Johnson. Dr. Jason Johnson, you earned a PhD. I think that's what they say. PhD. I earned one. Is that right? And what did you earn it in?
Well, you buy them. I mean, you can buy them. That's just kind of unethical and illegal, but you can buy one. Oh,
but you earned yours.
I did. I earned mine. I snatched it from the grubby little paws of a whole lot of fairly unpleasant faculty members at my PhD alma mater.
When did you know that you wanted to be a PhD, that you wanted to pursue your PhD? Was there a moment in time?
It was when I was working. I was working as a campaign manager and political consultant for the Democratic Senate slate in Maryland. And there was a whole bunch of really crazy, corrupt stuff going on. And I realized that I didn't necessarily like these people. But if I stayed as a campaign manager and consultant, which is what I've been doing, I had worked for Walter Lloyd and Clementa Pinckney in South Carolina. That's Clem Pinckney, who was killed by Dylann Roof 15 years later. I realized that if I went and got a doctorate, I'd have a lot more control, perhaps, over the kind of people that I had to work for and with in campaign politics. And on top of that, it sort of occurred to me that if you want to teach, and I would have had an interest in teaching, if you have a PhD, it's greater job security. So it was a bunch of different factors. I didn't realize how tough it was going to be. I don't think anyone does. It's like probably medical school. Like, I don't think anyone can prepare you for how difficult medical school and residency are. I don't think no one can tell you how difficult the PhD process really is. It is long. It is arduous. It is incredibly challenging, probably even under the best of circumstances. I wouldn't recommend it to anybody unless you are specifically interested in being able to teach. Otherwise, I don't think it's worth it.
I'm thinking of getting mine.
I think not. You know
why?
Do
you think I should complete my bachelor's first?
I mean, maybe. I think some programs will accept you into a PhD program without having your bachelor's finished. I wouldn't bother, though. Unless you feel like throwing a good 30, 40 grand down the drain.
I'm very happy to talk to you today, and I love that you're a PhD, and I love talking about your experiences in academia, and I think that you working with young folks gives you, a very important perspective that you always are able to share as well. So I want to get into a bunch of things with you, but this is the end of the week. We're talking Friday morning. I really appreciate you taking my call. And I want to know how you've seen this week or how you've experienced the first week as we descend into chaos, into what seems like some real fascism, some billionaire oligarchy run stuff. Here we go. We're on our way. What are your general first initial feelings of the week?
It's bad. It's not as bad as it's going to get. Everybody was saying this after the election, and it's more apparent now. None of this is addressing the things that people who voted for Trump claimed that they wanted to be addressed. Right. Like, let's just be very clear about that. To the degree that any of that rhetoric was about the price of gas or eggs, none of these executive orders have done
Congress addressed the trans kids in sports thing right away as first thing.
Exactly. And look, there are some very ignorant, foolish people for which that matters to them. And it's interesting, Pete, I've had this conversation with a couple of people, and I want to make this abundantly clear. I am absolutely 100% have no quarter or patience for anyone whose vote was in any way driven by some asinine bigotry about 10 kids at a school systems of 60,000. Right? It's just absolutely insane. It's really just bigotry. If that even comes to mind for you, it's bigotry.
Yeah.
And it's silly. And it's really one of those things that people just get mad about because they just don't like gay people. They don't like trans people.
But it's so
whatever
effective.
It is.
It's so effective. And I never want to minimize it because of my own personal experience with it. I mean, they took over our Board of Education on that singular issue and on a lie about it all. More importantly, they just lied about what the board did regarding trans kids in bathrooms. People in the town believed it, including liberal Democrats. And it was just that issue. So I don't want to minimize, and I don't think you are, but how much it does affect your local schools. I mean, and once they got in, they didn't change anything about that, but that was never what they were trying to do. Once they were trying to control, obviously control curriculum and ban history and teach Jesus.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. So none of the executive orders this week really have any sort of policy improvements from what people supposedly complained about. You've already got ICE raids happening right now. You have this asinine executive order talking about two genders, that, people are supposed to be what they are at conception. And anyone who's gone through sixth grade biology knows that everyone is born a girl. And then the X chromosome comes in. Like, we all actually start off in the sort of DNA goop, cellular goop, as girls.
I didn't. That's how manly I am. I didn't. I was one of the few who started off.
You came out flexing like, Vince McMahon.
Yeah.
From the moment your father put you in there, it's like, hey. I am a man.
I wrote a Corvette out of my mom. I'm sorry, folks. I apologize.
Right, exactly.
I apologize.
Look at these things. They dropped immediately. It came out with facial hair.
Yeah. Yeah. People, I mean, folks would be shocked to know, but it's a good way of making that point. Obviously, sorry to interrupt you, but it's true.
Yeah. So the point is, I know people right now who are directly or indirectly impacted by all of these new policies. I have a mentee who is getting his doctorate in entomology, right? And that is bugs, I believe. Yes, entomology is bugs. Mm-hmm. And he's in Georgia, and the lab where he's doing his doctoral work is funded by NIH money, right? So it's like it's federal money to study bugs and insects and how they affect farming and everything. This is like real functional research for supposedly, the heartbeat of America, and their funding has been suspended for 90 days. I have another friend who was like, hey, my employee's wife works in a company that audits, distributes, and analyzes where foreign aid goes. Well, they're funded by the federal government.
Right.
All their money is gone. Agency after agency after agency. Look, these people were never surgeons. They were always axe murderers. So just shutting down federal funding has so many different impacts in so many different areas.
Right now, there's a hiring freeze. I mean,
and a hiring freeze.
The best reporting right now being done is talking to anybody, rank and file, that works in the federal government, many of which I mean, the things you're hearing from folks is how is it affecting you right now? You're just giving an example. I mean, I've talked to a few people too, and it's frozen their jobs. Mm-hmm. They're trying. I mean, a lot of people are trying to figure out. Have you heard a lot about this remote work order that he signed. Everybody's got to go back to work. Well, during the pandemic, they got rid of work. Literally, the building's gone. They moved all over the country. They're doing their jobs well, effectively. In this case, I think they're studying like food poisoning in the Department of Agriculture. But now they're not doing that, Jason. They're not monitoring. They're trying to find out if they're supposed to go to work or where they're supposed to live or where they're supposed to go to work if they do, because there's no building. How much are you hearing about how much that's affecting people, the remote working orders? And
the remote working, the end of research grants, the lack of direction, the supposed snitching on this sort of racist anti-DEI thing. Let's be honest. If you're revoking an anti-discrimination policy from Lyndon Johnson in 1965, that has nothing to do with DEI. Nobody was talking about DEI until 3 or 4 years ago. That is just you were trying to return the country to the 1920s, not the 60s, the 20s. Woodrow Wilson is what I was talking about when I talk about cyclical history. Remember, Woodrow Wilson is the guy who resegregated the federal government. People forget that from the end of like the Civil War until the late teens, mid to late teens, that the federal government, not the Army, but the federal government was actually integrated in Washington, D.C. and a couple of other places. This guy came into office. Woodrow Wilson was racist for the time. And said, no, we're going to resegregate, in like 1916, 17, we're going to resegregate the post office. So that's what you see happening here, right? The idea that you're going to retroactively define hires as DEI hires, which makes no sense, right? Because just like affirmative action, there was never any sort of federal affirmative action law. It was a policy that was implemented in different agencies depending on the circumstances. The same thing with diversity, but it's all a lie. It's all a lie. So, I'm of the mindset that, hey, it's just been a week. There will be many, many worse things coming down the pipe. There will be threats. I mean, they're already talking about threats when it comes to disaster aid. There will be threats to states. They will come after HBCUs. They will come after everything. The issue is just going to be what, if anything, finally elicits backlash and what form that backlash takes. That we don't know.
So last night at our hangout, listeners, subscribers, it was amazing group of people there last night. And one, I don't call them out by name, maybe on the podcast, but a gentleman named Scott basically talked about, I think it was him, who was just talking about some of these executive orders that you just mentioned regarding anti-discrimination, affirmative action, repealing the EEOC, and so on. And one of the comments he made, and then I've heard now Roland Martin and others say it too, so maybe you're hearing this. They're trying to defund Black America.
Yeah.
And when he said it, it was so impactful to me. And then he gave the example, and I'm not sure how accurate it is. It sounds accurate, that a lot of Black folks work in the federal government because obviously job security, which is why anybody works for the federal government. But more importantly, specifically to Black folks, because of the protections, the federal protections, anti-discrimination protections. It's a, quote, safer place for a Black person to work in that type of job. And you're not getting that nearly as much in the private sector. So help me out on all of that.
Oh, it's completely true. I mean, the D.C. metropolitan area, Montgomery County, PG County, Fairfax County, all the sort of surrounding counties in Virginia, Maryland, near Washington, D.C., the Black upper and middle class is made up of federal employees. And in many instances, you will see African Americans achieve positions of power and influence at executive levels that it's almost impossible to get in the private sector. Not because the skill sets are any different, but because the private sector is a lot more racist and there's a lot fewer protections. So when you see, every time you see some, Black executive near the top of the EPA, if you see some African-American executive, I mean, I will use my mother example because she's been on the show, right? My mother was HR director at the FBI Academy. That's the one thing she talked to you about. HR director at the FBI Academy. The security that's required for that job, the skill set required for that job, the complications required for that job are massive. If my mother could be the HR director at the FBI Academy, there's no reason she couldn't have been like director of internal affairs at Google or Facebook or something else like that.
Right. But they don't have the protections.
Yeah, but those companies don't tend to hire Black people. Those companies don't tend to promote Black people. And so what you have is, if you are attacking the federal government is an indirect way, yes, not just to defund Black America, but also to limit the effectiveness of the government. Because what you have when you have diversity within the federal government, it means that different kinds of communities have a voice in policy decisions, right? I throw this out all the time. Most people don't know this. 40% of the women in the U.S. Army are Black. If you look at just the women who are in the Army, like 40% of them are Black, which is a crazy number if you think about it, right? There's not that many women in the Army, relatively speaking. But yes, 40% of them are Black women, as a paper I wrote like 5-6 years ago. So I say all that to say that's why you get things like the Crown Act, right? Because you had, Black women being promoted to officers and everything else like that. And it's like, hey, these rules for how you keep your hair in the military do not make sense for the military. Now, nobody is walking around in the armed forces with locks that go down to your shoulders, right? But we need to have some uniform rules here so that every single Black woman doesn't have to walk around bald either, because white women don't have to do that. So where policy comes into play. So this is what they're doing, and they're not going to stop. And it's going to be very rough and very unpleasant for a lot of people. And especially with these raids going on, they have one in Newark, New Jersey. They're claiming they're going to do raids in Chicago. I know people right now who work with kids. I have a friend from high school who was just texting me about the fact that, she's basically a guidance counselor for, high school kids. And she's like, look, these kids, their parents don't want to answer the phone now because they're afraid that if they do, it's a trap. They don't want to bring their kids to school. And some of these people are documented. But remember, they're revoking people whose statuses were legal under the previous administration. So that's what we're facing right now.
Yes, that's what we're facing right now, and so much more. I mean, the president's going to go to California, I guess in North Carolina, to see the disasters there. It'll be interesting to see how he reacts to that and how it's handled. I mean, we're hearing a lot of Republicans say that California doesn't deserve to be helped by the federal government because they created a problem with their policies. What do you think of just that, any of that?
I mean, I'm not surprised. Look, these are not smart people. And I need everyone to understand that because it also is how you fight back. You're not dealing with smart people. You're not dealing with people who are particularly sophisticated, right? That's how, like I said, that's how you can have a dumb law, an executive order, which means they've been thinking about this. Because remember, they had an executive order that said the thing about, gender or birth. It's like, these are not smart people. Like, that's basic stuff, right? So the idea that you're going to withhold federal aid from California unless they eliminate DEI, I mean, they're going to try and extract whatever it is they can extract from the state. Anything that you do that harms the California economy ends up harming the United States economy as a whole. We hear all the data all the time that California's economy alone is like the 5th biggest in the world. It is a bigger economy. That state's economy is bigger than a lot of countries. That state's economy is a massive engine for how the rest of the United States actually operates. I mean, it's a big old state. It's basically the back end, of the United States if you go east to west. So if you harm that state for some political nonsense, it just ends up harming everybody else. Do you think that when there are, tornadoes and hurricanes that wipe things out in Louisiana, Mississippi, do you think their money is what pays for that disaster relief? No, it's federal taxes that you take from businesses that are based in California. So it's foolish, but I'm not surprised.
What do you make of the phrase vibe shift? People are using this phrase to describe what's happening, and I don't want to say much more than that because I think that it's not. I think it's far more than that, or I just feel like that's kind of insulting, and I keep hearing it, and I want to kind of correct people on. It's not a vibe shift; it's a paradigm shift. I feel like saying it's a vibe shift. Like we're headed. This is fascism. We're being run by oligarchs. It's anti-democratic. It's like it's not a vibe shift towards masculinity or whatever people are trying to, or towards more racism or something like that, or white dominance or something. It's I feel like it's far more than a vibe shift, and I just don't love that. Maybe it's not a great.
I don't know who's using that phrase, and I would probably change the channel, TV, YouTube, or whatever, if I heard anybody say it's not a vibe shift. And I told people this 2024 was not an election. It was regime change. These people are very much interested and dedicated in, sort of establishing fascism that won't end for a long time. And, that's why you have some senator or some congressman from Tennessee today coming out and proposing a bill that allows a president to serve 3 terms or 4 terms or whatever. I've told people already, it's not like Donald Trump, as long as Donald Trump is alive, he's going to run for president in 2028. He's not going to step down. He's going to run for president again. And our Supreme Court will do absolutely nothing about it because they're all bought off. And I say this also because I can't help but go backwards. Joe Biden's one of the worst. He may go down as the worst president in American history.
Wow.
And I mean that sincerely. I mean it authentically. He may go down as the worst president in American history. And the reason why is because this is his fault. And here's the thing. Every single president that comes in, from my perspective, philosophically, has sort of an existential responsibility, right? Like, there's a big question that the country is facing, and they asked you to solve it. That's why you won, right? Why does Ronald Reagan win in 1980? He wins because America was upset and his ego was bruised after Vietnam. And it was like, we just need somebody to make us feel better. America needs somebody to make us feel. And so here comes the cowboy, right? His job was to make America feel tough and macho. And he did it. That's how he answered the question. What was Bill Clinton elected on? He didn't even get the majority of the vote, right? And that's the important thing to remember. But the existential question the Clinton was faced with is the country needed a guide to move on from the greatest generation. That nobody knew what to do, right? That's why the country was so split. So I say that to say the responsibility. Joe Biden had one job. It's the job he claimed he was prepared for. His job was to, quote unquote, restore the soul of America. But the bigger job was you got to do whatever the heck it is you can do to make sure this man never runs for office again. That is your single solitary job, because nothing else that you accomplish policy-wise will stay in place if Donald Trump gets back into office. That was Joe Biden's one job, and he failed. He failed at every single level. And to the degree that we're going to have to deal with Trump and Trumpism for another 20, possibly 40 years, because when he does pass, it'll just be his son. It'll be J.D. Vance. There will be so many laws will have been repealed and established new norms that it will take generations for us to get out of what this man has created. And Biden was supposed to stop it, and he failed.
I think you're putting too much on one man.
I don't. That's his job. That's why he said he was running.
What about
and he did not do everything in his power.
The responsibility.
He did not do
Why
everything
not
in his power to stop this guy.
Say that again. I'm sorry.
I say he did not do everything in his power to stop this from happening again. Not rhetorically, not policy-wise, and not behavior.
What about all the Republicans who didn't vote to impeach Trump, preventing him from running again? Or what about the responsibility of the electorate?
Well, one, the Republicans were already baked into the cake. If you're going to stop Trump from running again, obviously that means that you have to be more aggressive and more assertive with Republicans. Didn't do that, right? The next thing
but
is—
they couldn't have been more aggressive or more assertive on the vote to impeach. There's nothing you could do there. I mean—
Right. But we're talking past the impeachment vote, right? Like, yeah, you can't control how the Republicans are going to vote. What you can do is rhetorically every single moment of every single day for the 4 years you're in office, tell the American people these folks are dangerous, and stop trying to always make friends and find common ground with people who tried to have you killed, right? Stop allowing Republican leaders to sort of gaslight you, or maybe be honest and say you're going to be a transitional president. And consequently, he should have announced after 2022, hey, we retook the House, we retook the Senate. I ain't running again.
So in terms of what you're saying, putting all, blaming him and calling him the worst president and saying that he should have done everything he could have to stop, you're saying that when he was president, he should have done everything he could to prevent Trump from ever being able to run again and prosecuting him, as well as the other part of him being a bad president. And this is what I thought you were going to say when you first said it, was that just him choosing to run again. Both of those things. Or is one more than the other? Because, specifically, what more could he have done to prevent Trump from running again or to prosecute Trump than he did with the makeup of that Supreme Court, especially. We could point to Merrick Garland being ineffectual, obviously. I think that's the main thing. But what else?
Yes. Well, that's a huge one, right? Like, you need a wartime consigliere. He didn't do that. I mean, you could have. There are plenty of Sam Waterston-esque from Law and Order. So he could have picked somebody better than Merrick Garland. He could have gone and picked somebody, like I said, some Sam Waterston-esque from Law and Order, someone more aggressive, someone who was willing to push rules, but also rhetorically. And this is an important part of being the president. Even if you can't get it done policy-wise, you have to say it. You have to say, these people are a danger to democracy. I'm not going to work with them. They're not okay. We're not going to try and find common ground with people who tried to have us killed. That's what you're supposed to say and do. When it comes to the Supreme Court, no, you can't change the Supreme Court. But what you don't do, and Elie Mystal talks about this all the time, what you don't do is shut down the idea of court expansion or court reform. You don't sit on that. You don't say, I don't really think we should do it. I want to stick with the institutions. Like, rhetorically, Joe Biden failed the test of addressing the true existential issues that the country is facing. And now we're going to deal with that for the next 20 to 40 years. And if you're the president at the wheel of the greatest terror attack in American history, like George W. Bush, or if you're the president at the wheel when fascism is at the door and you don't go down swinging and fighting, then yeah, you get to be known as one of the worst presidents in history. I think we've lived through two of them. George Bush and Joe Biden might be two of the worst presidents that we've ever had in American history, and that includes Hoover and Wilson.
What is just your thoughts about the pardoning of the insurrectionists specifically that tried to kill or almost killed and may have killed police officers and certainly beat the hell out of a lot of them?
It's like the federal government version of Prison Break, right? Like, you let all these criminals out of Arkham and now they're running loose in the streets. These people are terrorists. They're terrorists. They tried to take over the government violently. They're terrorists. And not only are they terrorists, but they are unrepentant. They don't think that what they did was wrong. So they'll be willing to do it again. And we already are hearing stories from family members, children, ex-wives and girlfriends and husbands of these people who were part of the investigation to turn them in, who are now fearing for their lives. Yeah. Because these crazy, violent people who are terrorists have decided, oh yeah, I'm out of jail, and the first thing I'm going to do is get revenge on the Batman, right? Like, that's what's happening right now. But again, this is what I say about these folks they're axe murderers, not surgeons, right? Like, no one's thinking about, all right, let's take a look at some of the January 6th insurrectionists and see, because, hey, maybe some of them we think were just there politically. But I mean, think about it. Most of those people got off anyway. The people who are in jail were really only the people who did actual physical violence that was caught on camera. There were thousands of people who were in the building who didn't go to jail. They all should have gone to jail. And like I said, at the time, and we know it's true, if that crowd were mostly composed of non-white people, they'd be dead. Yeah. Cops would have opened fire and killed them all.
What do you make of the fact very few police organizations, Republicans who back the blue have made statements or feigned any kind of outrage?
I think the Fraternal Order of Police released a statement, but they blamed Republicans and Democrats as they're a bunch of cowards. If I remember that correctly, I believe they released a statement, but it blamed Democrats and Republicans because they're just cowards. Just absolute, unadulterated cowards. And anyone who capitulates to this stuff is being a coward. Anyone who can see Elon Musk do a neo-Nazi salute and pretend that it's not a neo-Nazi salute, right? And here's the thing. I'm going to be as fair and generous as possible. Regardless of what his intentions were, it's how it looks to everybody. And people who are in positions where symbolic action matters should know better. I can stand in front of an entire room of people and flip them the bird. Hey, I wasn't telling everybody F you. I was pointing with my middle finger. That's just a weird quirk that I have. I point with my middle finger. So what? Everybody knows how that's interpreted by 90% of the population. So, anybody who's trying to pretend and justify this behavior and rationalize the behavior, they're capitulating.
Exactly.
It's pathetic.
Exactly. All right. I'll let you go. I really appreciate your time. as always. I hope that you'll continue to join us throughout.
Oh, of course. I'll join you pretty regularly. It's going to be a fascinating year, Mr. Dominic, a very, very fascinating year. And I'll tell you this, happy birthday. I saw you posted that your daughter just had a 20th birthday. So thank you for being an old man and taking care, being a parent. Is that your eldest?
Yeah, she's awesome. She's turned out really well. You know, that's all you can possibly hope for and imagine. Like, she's such an awesome woman, and I love hanging out with her, and we're really close, and she's doing very, very well in her second year of school, living in New York City and kicking ass.
There we go. See, that's the thing. I tell people this all the time because I'm not a court intrigue person. I'm not a gloom and doom person. I've spent most of this week, I'll close on this. I spent most of this week watching Netflix. I watched Castlevania Nocturne, which was awesome if you're into Castlevania sort of stuff. But just because the country is collapsing, and it is, right? It is actually collapsing. It doesn't mean that your individual existence needs to be absolutely dominated by this stuff.
Right. No.
That's actually not how this has to work.
I'm talking about that and trying to examine that and understand that every day with folks and trying to help each other do what you're describing. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like people lived through the 1920s. People lived through the 1930s. They did.
Yeah.
And that's the last time this stuff was happening.
Yeah.
And so we have to be honest with ourselves about what is occurring, and then we have to be honest about what it is we can control. You can control things at the local level, like you talk about with your school board. You can stop this craziness in your own community. You can unplug from social media. This is going to be a big thing I'm going to be talking about over the next couple of months, telling people to unplug from social media. Take it off your phone and just keep it on your laptop. Recognize that if you're a content creator, maybe now's the time to go and invest in crazy concept, a website again, because then you are less likely to be manipulated and influenced by random algorithms. There are resources that we have available to maintain our own freedom, our integrity, and our own resistance that didn't exist the last time this happened in 1920, 1925, 1820, 1825. Use those resources, because that's what we're going to need. And if we remain obsessed with what's happening in Washington, D.C., we'll forget what's happening right in front of us.
Well said. I probably should have mentioned before you said that my younger daughter is actually in jail. She's in juvenile detention for running a Ponzi scheme. But listen, you can't win. You can't have both kids.
First off, creative, right? Points for the hustle. Points for the hustle.
No, the truth is,
would you rather have a lazy kid living off the system or a kid who's trying to do a Ponzi scheme? I would say the Ponzi scheme shows some ambition.
Truth is, she's so ambitious about school. It's ridiculous. She goes in she has a straight A. She gets great grades. She goes in early and she stays late, but she goes to the library on her own. She's got a license, got a car. Last night I was like, where are you? And she was at the library. She goes a couple days a week and she sits in a library and she has a box that she bought that locks her phone up so that she can't get to it and be distracted by it while she's studying. Yeah.
See?
Yep.
You did something right, Pete.
Something right. Thanks, buddy. Love you, man. Appreciate it. All right.
Later. Peace.
All right. There he goes. Dr. Jason Johnson. DrJasonJohnson.com. Follow him on all the social media. All of it's linked to Jason back in the show notes for today and every day's episode, including everything you want to know about Maura Quint, who joins me now. Maura just moved to a new job. It's called Fair Share America. You can hear her talking about that. Still working with Americans for tax fairness in conjunction with them. Of course, she created the Tax March a few years back, and we love her. Her activism, her humor, her brilliance, her wisdom, her humanity. Always a great person to have in our conversation. She'll be joining us out in Vegas at PODJAM. You can meet her in person, so I hope you'll get tickets for that. But let's do it right now with Maura Quint, who, by the way, if you're not following on Blue Sky, a great, great follow. Do it now. Let's go. You've got a new job, and it's really exciting. You have totally given up on your former values. You're now working at Target as a manager, removing their DEI policies. You've really sold out.
Oh, no. I turned that job down. I mean, it was very lucrative. Actually, what I'm now doing is I am the person who prepares the shots every morning for our new Secretary of Defense so that when he wakes up, he can just instantly throw back some fireball.
You're bartending at the Pentagon for SecDef?
I mean, someone had to do it, and I thought that sounds like I can do that. I think I can handle that. So yeah,
good to know.
We've
got someone close, very close to him, so we can hatch a plot.
Yeah, whispering in that ear, and I'm whispering, "Kill yourself." That's what I'm whispering. Anyway, no, that's not what I'm doing. I am doing more tax policy. I know that's a shock. It's amazing that I would be doing tax policy for multiple years and then continue to do tax policy. But God, I just love it so much.
Well, you're effective and it's really, really important. It's such an important issue. But I mean, a lot has changed, obviously, and then a lot hasn't. So tell us kind of what this new role is and lay out the landscape of the current fight initiative, what you're doing. What is the organization?
So I am working for Fair Share America, which is an organization that is very much in keeping. It works alongside my previous organization, Americans for Tax Fairness, which is still a wonderful organization. This is all like kumbaya. We're all in this together. And I'm just jumping in terms of what I'm focused on. So with ATF, we had a Democratic administration. We were really focused on trying to lobby and trying to move bills. Now that we are in this situation, the situation that we are in, I don't think we're going to be as effective trying to push through bills. So right now we are more in a let's stop the bad stuff as much as we possibly can. Mm. And let's try to, it's not just, I want so badly to say we just got to stop the Republicans. No, we have to beat the hell out of these Democrats because they are behaving just, I can't find the adjective because they're all coming to me so quickly and none of them are strong enough. Well, but I'm so fucking mad at them.
Be more specific if you could, because I get irked at the generalization of Democrats because I feel like there are some who I wish were in leadership and in charge that are doing this work. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Jasmine Crockett, Jamie Raskin, and others. I don't know. Maybe you disagree with any one of them or who are you referring to? Because it feels like the old guard that's there is not fighting. They're playing by the old rules. And the new guard, the younger folks, know exactly what needs to be done, but they have to deal with the older guard. Is my specificity resonating or do you disagree?
I think there's certainly some of that. I wish it was just old versus new. It's not. There are some good Dems, absolutely. But what I'm currently reacting to is last night we had the vote for Treasury Secretary for Scott Bessent to be Secretary of Treasury. Now, in 2017, you had one Democrat, one vote for Mnuchin, whose name I still stumble over when I try and say, but one Dem defected. Do you know how many Democratic senators voted for Scott Bessent last night? 16 of them. That is an insane amount of Democrats defecting and voting for an absolutely horrible human being to lead an important agency. And you didn't just have, Cory Booker. You've got Gillibrand. You've got, Slotkin we know, but she's young. That's where I'm I don't want to, say it's just an age thing. It is infuriating that we have to start by trying to fight these Dems, but we have to because they need to get in line. This behavior is unacceptable. I don't mean to sound like a kindergarten teacher, but that is how I feel right now.
Why did they vote for him?
I don't know, Pete. I don't know. I don't know what the hell they're doing. And the problem is, I don't think anyone seems to know. No one seems to be in charge of this caucus right now. I have no faith in leadership at the moment, I will tell you. Yeah, I'm pretty angry. And if you are in any of the states, the 16 Dem states, feel free to give a call and let your senators know that you hate them and think they're being ridiculous. And we cannot be going out the gate, conceding and capitulating to terrible Republican demands.
Booker, Cantwell, Coons, Fetterman, Gallego, Gillibrand, Hassan, Hickenlooper, Kane, Kelly, King, Peters, Shaheen, Slotkin, Warner.
Yep. That's the list. Yeah. So I'm quite frustrated.
Their people must need something from Treasury, and they don't want their states to be ignored by the Treasury Department or worse, punished by the Treasury Department.
Pete, I don't even think it's that. You're trying to find a pleasant justification.
There has to be a justification, and I think that they're doing it. I think we need to leave open the fact that people are going to do things to protect their people from the worst.
It's not going to work. That's an absurd thing, and we all know it. We all know it. That is not going to buy them a goddamn thing. It does not get them anywhere.
Maybe so.
Okay. That sounded like a but. That sounded like you were going to say maybe so, but. So that's why I gave you the nice pause. I didn't keep talking. That was stupid of me. All right. Why did I think you had something more to say?
Well, I come to the conclusion that people do things for a reason, and I want to know the reason. And the only reason I can come up with without reading any journalism, without reading any reporting on it, especially given your point that only one voted for Mnuchin, I think that's a really important point. The context matters, and I want to get to the bottom of this. But the only thing I can imagine is they're worried about being punished. And you're seeing now that those punishments be doled out. I think you may be right, because the Secretary of the Treasury vote, I'm not sure how much he holds it against them or what power he has. But if Trump sees that you voted against my Secretary of Treasury, guess what you're not going to get? Money, aid, and your people will suffer. And so they're voting for him. And I think you're right. He's going to punish them anyway.
I mean, we all know that. And to take any sort of stance of thinking that that was a rational line of thought, that like, oh, geez, maybe I can kiss up to the idiot king and then he will spare me and my children. You know, when you have seen that has literally never, ever, ever been the case, not only will he slaughter you, your children, and the people that he's been friends with the whole time, like you already know that to be the case. So that line of thinking, I think, can just be thrown aside because it is stupid. It is like me saying, well, I'm pretty sure that the world is flat. It's probably only 2 miles and then I'm going to jump right the heck off of it. Like, I'm pretty sure it's 2 miles down the road that way. And then I'm done. Like, everything in the entire universe is telling me, well, that's a stupid thought. Like, some thoughts are stupid. Some lines of thinking are bad. Some justifications are just desperate reaches and are nothing more than that and should not be given validity. Because you're telling me that everyday people are far braver than any of these people or smarter than any of these people. I mean, they are, absolutely. But I'm not going to sit here and say that a senator gets like a little like, oh, we can just say like, well, I'm sure you had a good idea in mind. No, what you're doing is shitty, unhelpful, bad, problematic. It is causing all sorts of difficulty in general. And you obviously are selling us all out, and you should be called out for that. And you should be held accountable for that. We cannot just say like, oh, gee, well, I hope you were doing your best. No, fuck that and fuck them.
Tell me how you feel about it. Specifically now, let's get into the landscape of tax policy, where we're at, how we got here, and what they are trying to change. Because just real quick, it would seem that when Trump was president last time, they passed a massive tax cut, and they didn't cut spending. So that created the greatest deficit ever by any president, I think, budget deficit. And now he's back. That was never fixed. And they want to do that more. They want to cut more. And again, it would seem that the people who are getting the tax cuts are the wealthiest. And so people like you do great work at messaging around to the rest of us about exactly what's being done and who it's being done for. But it would seem one of the best messages is they're taking your money and giving it to super wealthy people. That resonates with me. But how did I do it laying out where we were and how we got here? Punch it up.
No, that was exactly right. The one goal that they have is wealth distribution. And it's really funny because that's always the sort of thing that people call out like, oh, these Marxists and communists, they want wealth distribution. Wealth distribution is already happening. It is a fundamental goal of the Republican Party. It's just that what they want is they want to take any sort of wealth from the lower middle classes and they want to distribute it up to the very, very tippy top. That's what they're trying to do. That's all they continue trying to do. And we're seeing it right now in real time. There is a freeze on spending. So we are a couple of days into this thing and they are telling us, hey, do you need SNAP? Do you need food assistance? Nope. We can't waste money on you. We have to give that money. We just have to hand it in a nice big fat pile to billionaires. That's who needs this. They're the ones who are really hurting. And they are actively asking the rest of us to outright die. And I will make it that plain and that severe because people will die without the help that they were getting from the government, that they deserve, that they have invested in. It is money that they have paid in, that they deserve to receive back that is being taken from them. And it is being taken and handed directly to billionaires who don't need a goddamn dime. And that is what is happening right now. And it is infuriating. I'm so keto. I'm like ready to go this morning, Pete. You want to box after this? Like,
no.
Just like, okay. Does anyone? Because I need to.
Although I did just imagine physically fighting you, and all I know of you is your clumsiness. So I do feel like I could evade one punch and you'll go down by the momentum of the actual punch.
I'll trip getting into the ring and knock myself out. That is probably.
But I know then while on the ground, you'll look up at me with real anger and throw like a vase at my face that will catch me, and that'll be a wrap.
You're right. You have completely accurately called it. That is exactly what will happen.
But
I'm still ready. Let's do it.
That made it funnier that I said vase and that I pronounce it as vase. Okay. So what are you specifically advocating for? Where does the pressure be put? Going back to the point you made earlier, is not only obviously you put it on pressure on Republicans, but on Democrats. But so specifically around this policy, I mean, it feels like in the reporting I've read about the legislative agenda for Republicans and Trump, they're going to try to pass maybe one giant bill. They've only got 2 years before they possibly lose a minority if we have elections. It seems like we're moving pretty fast away from everything that's normal. And including elections. So who knows what happens in the midterms? And I'm not operating as if there are going to be any. I hate to sound too concerned, but anyway, specifically, what about the legislative agenda and where does the pressure come to bear? What are you doing?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, first of all, we are absolutely trying to put pressure on Dems to stay together. They need to fully oppose this. They cannot be defecting in any moment. They have to stay united in opposition. We need a strong opposition. So that is first and foremost. Dems need to stay together, and we are doing everything we can to make sure they're hearing from people in their districts, in their states, telling them they have to oppose the Republican agenda. That's thing one. Thing two is that as angry as I am, and as much as Republicans want this, fortunately, they are actually not as organized and coordinated as we might fear they would be, especially on econ issues. There are fissures within the Republican caucus. There are differences of value and opinion and where they need to be putting their focus. And there are still some deficit hawks who really care about that. There are some that really, really care about SALT, state and local taxes. And they all have these like sort of specific little issues. And what we can try and do right now is delay and divide and try and really take advantage of these splits wherever we can and keep pushing this vote off as far as possible. And one of the ways that we can do that as well is by putting a tremendous amount of pressure on Republicans within their districts and their states. They need to be hearing constantly that this is an issue that matters, because fundamentally this is an issue that crosses party lines. And so some Republicans are still susceptible to that. They do still have some part of their very dwindling soul that tells them maybe they shouldn't fully sell out every single person that they represent. And maybe that won't allow them to continue leading in that place. There are some of them that still will hear that eventually. And so we're specifically focusing on as many of them as we can, especially ones who are in sort of swing-ish districts, and trying to put the pressure on them to make sure that they hear that this is an important issue to people. So you can go to fairshareusa.org. You can sign up there. You can join this. We are organizing people in districts and in states to push back and to fight against this issue, because this is going to be the ongoing fight that they will be having in Congress and in the Senate. So join us, sign up, let's fight back. We think that we have a chance, really. I mean, it feels really tough, really uphill, but there is enough of a split in what they're doing in the Republican caucus that we might be able to push this one off for long enough that we could actually potentially even shoot it down.
Wow. Well, I hope you're right. And I hope people go to Fair Share USA and support Maura's work, this new organization that she's working with. Finally, a personal-ish question, which is, how are you coping? I'm actually doing surprisingly well. And by that, I mean, I panic plenty and sure. I'm terrified and I have all kinds of moments all day, but I have this kind of practice, mental practice that's kicking in most of the time, a lot of the time. And so I feel like I can return to my work, which I think is really important and purposeful. How are you doing in general? You seem pretty fired up. Obviously, you got a new job. You got a lot of things going on. I know you told me, but like in terms of coping, what would you say to people that's working when it does? Because we know it's not all the time. We panic plenty.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I think to recognize that, like, yeah, things feel really bleak and despairing. And I think rather than trying to pretend that's not the case, it's important to acknowledge that, yeah, it feels real bad right now. One of the things that I did right after the election happened was I just had this whole sort of internal, like, crises, despairing feeling of like, okay, there's nothing but the people in my physical, geographical, immediate surroundings. We have to rely on one another, right? If something goes down, I need to know that I can go to a neighbor.
Yeah.
So I reached out to several women that I knew, who I knew voted like I voted, and said, hey, I'd like to start organizing some local group here. Do you guys want to meet up? And we met in the week following the election.
Great.
And we are meeting once a month, and we are sitting around and we are having, you know, a drink if we need to or whatever. Like you can call it a wine mom thing if you want, but the focus is always let's find an actionable item and let's work on that together. And we are organizing locally and we are expanding outward at a regular basis. And I'm telling you that this is like one of the most grounding things. And I'm so glad that I'm doing this because it is giving me something to hold on to when everything feels really, really out of control and really big and really like impossible, right? Like how do you combat all of the terrible things that are happening on immigration? You, as one person, cannot do that.
Right.
But as a small group of people who are fundamentally aligned on a couple of main points, you can start to go, hey, what do we do when this hits our community? Yep. Because it's hitting our community. So how can we affect change immediately where we are? And that is something that is really making a huge, huge difference on my mental health. And I think if I didn't have that, I'd probably spit out a lot more.
That's great. That is so good, especially because of the local part of it, but you can do it virtually as well. But that being said, have you talked about that publicly, that you're doing that with this group?
Not really. I mean, it is something, new and stuff that we've done.
I'd love to see you just like post on Blue Sky or wherever, like just seeing, one coping thing I'm doing and just talk about it. Although you'd have to, rename it something other than Wine Mom with your hacky sexist trope.
We call it Women's Salon right now. And I have, because it specifically the group that we are organizing, it's for women, non-binary, trans women and trans men, but no cis men are invited to our meetings to this point. So there's that.
Salon. Very sophisticated. It sounds like it's very sophisticated. You guys dress up and
Central Pennsylvania, man. We're like all over it. We do not dress up. No, it's a very like cozy, comfy thing. But I'm happy to share with anybody if people are interested in like, how do I do this locally? Because it was surprising how not hard it was. And that's coming from someone who like, I don't have a lot of friends near me. I mean, most of my friends are spread out around the country. I don't have a huge community here. I'm not like a very social person.
That surprises people to find out, knowing your personality. It's weird to me.
Well, I think it's also because I travel so much, right? So I'm in DC, I'm in New York, I'm in LA, I've lived all these places. And I do a lot of social things there. When I'm here, I'm just really in like, I'm mom, like I'm doing mom things. I'm not doing as many social things here in my own community. So I thought, oh gosh, I know like 2 people, like how am I going to do this? Well, those 2 people knew 2 people who knew 2 people who knew 2 people. We are like growing at such a rapid rate that it is astounding.
So your group is now grown from, I thought when you first said it, it was just a few women. Now it's.
So I've created a sign up form. I've created a whole thing. We had 8 people the first time. We now have a list of 25.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's evidence of there's a big demand for that. So good for you. That's great. I love it. And I am grateful that you shared that. And we'll talk more about it in Vegas with people because, we've done that virtually, but all the things that you're doing to make it work locally and to protect people, those are all tidbits and secrets that we all want to know and copy and steal and then franchise, monetize, and screw everyone.
Yay. I can't wait for that. God, someday. Imagine selling out. Doesn't that sound amazing?
Like you want to basically you get once you've created this group, you get them all together and you finally pitch your product, which is
the point is to brand it, and then it's tote bags, man.
You really should do as a bit. You should do an opening bit every time where it's a marketing scheme. Like you just pull out a bunch of knives. Thanks for coming, everybody. The Cutco brand really is.
We could Tupperware party this so quick.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
There you go.
Let's
I think you will actually.
MLM activism.
You'll keep adding layers to it to make it more thoughtful and fun and interesting. And people are going to be jealous that they're not in your group, but you should make your own and copy everything Maura's doing there in Pennsylvania, or join hers if you're anywhere in Western PA.
I will say I'm in Central PA, but I've written out like our general script and the way that we hold the meetings and things, and I'm happy to share all of the sort of assets with
great.
people.
Yeah, so, next time, or in Vegas, or both. Thank you. I'll let you go back to your very busy life. I appreciate you. We appreciate you. Thank you for joining us, Maura.
Thanks, Pete.
Yes, thank you, Maura. There you go, everybody. Go check her out at Fairshare America, FairShareUSA.org, everybody. Go check it out and follow her on Blue Sky. See her in person in Las Vegas at PODJAM 2. Get your tickets for that now. Read a rate and review of the show. Buy John Carroll's music. He's got a new album dropping soon. We'll talk with him about johncarroll.org. That's it. That's all I've got for you. Tomorrow looks like I'll have Jeff Jarvis and Eric Segall explaining this whole federal aid issue and whether or not it can be conditioned. I called him and talked about that, so I'll probably get that up for you along with Jarvis tomorrow. All right, guys, thank you very much for all of your support. I can't do it without you. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic. Bye-bye.
When you can't see the forest for the burning trees, you got to stand.